Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's program, the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley. Each week, we connect with and hear from fascinating and inspirational speakers, often with a message focused on our interests of innovation, entrepreneurship, and education. As a Rotary Club, we look for ways these programs might foster new approaches to improving communities near and far. We're glad you've joined us and hope you'll enjoy how we're exploring how technology and innovation can serve the business of service to others. I'll hand over to Rushton to introduce Les and Rach, who are our speakers for this week.
Thanks, Brett. It is a pleasure to have Les and Rach with us today. They are from the Future Design School based in Toronto. Les has spent time in 3 different countries, I believe, Switzerland and the United States and Canada as part of her professional work. But she also travels around the world to help others learn about possibilities through design and much more innovative approaches to education. I've had the pleasure of working with her myself, and I'm excited to have her here speaking with us. Additionally, we have Rachel Franks, who is a proud Kanien'kehá:ka member of that community in Canada. She is an education lead with Future Design School, and we are excited to hear what you both have to tell us. So with that, pass it over to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. We're excited to be here and meet you all and share a little bit about our work at Future Design School. As Rushton mentioned, we're an organization that is based in Canada, but we work with schools and organizations all over the world. So we hope to tell you a few stories today, give you a quick introduction to the work that we do, as well as some tangible examples of sort of the impact of that work. And hopefully you'll find some connections between the work that you're doing in your communities and the work that we're doing at Future Design School. As was mentioned, I'm Les McBeth, and I'm our Director of Special Projects, and this is Rachel Franks, and she's our education lead. Both of us have backgrounds in education, so we were both classroom teachers before we joined Future Design School, and then prior to that, we both have lived in several different countries and had careers before we became educators as well, and now we're able to combine that work together to support teachers all over teachers in schools and organizations all over the world. So when we think about like what is our mission at Future Design School, our mission is really to help educators and help students and organizations to build what we call a future-ready graduate, which is really how do we create a student that has optimism and a sense of identity and that leverages social emotional learning and learning skills in order to develop character and build these core competencies that really are going to help them to be successful in the future. And I think it aligns really well with the mission of the Rotary eClub of Silicon Valley in terms of your mission around entrepreneurship and innovation and service. Because that's really what drives our work at Future Design School, is helping students to feel empowered to be able to have an impact on the world around them. And we do that through these key elements of exceptional learning. So we really try to create programs that involve students identifying real problems in the world and really feeling like they have a choice and a voice in how to address those challenges, and building out real solutions that will help them to address challenges that they see in the world. And we see a lot of connections with that, especially around your education and youth programs that you have at Rotary International. We work with schools and organizations in a lot of different ways. So we support schools with their work around curriculum development and student programming. We also run professional development for educators, and we do a lot of strategy work with schools and organizations to help them to solve big problems that they're experiencing in their schools. But that's sort of a high level overview of what we do. And so we thought we would share a couple of stories with you that make that tangible and show you some of the impact of the work that we do. So I'm going to pass it over to Rach. Rach manages all of our student programming. We run student programs around the world. We've had them literally all over the past several years, and Rach manages all of that. So she's going to tell you some stories about student programming.
All right, thank you. So much like what Les had mentioned, the driving force behind all of our student programs is really to empower students to be their voice and to really make an impact on the world in the way that they choose and they want, and can infuse their beliefs and their experiences through that. So just to kick off, we have a number of stories from lots of students that have come through different programs, but I thought I'd share the story of McKenna. She was a grade 6 student when she first came to us and came through a program called Young Innovators, and through that program identified a challenge in the world that she was really passionate about. And at that time it was disposing of garbage and recycling in the best way. And so what she did was create an app to help other people just do that efficiently and get on board with it, and being able to bring that to different communities. But over the course of a few months, she actually realized her passions lie more with social justice. And so she uncovered some issues related to homelessness in Toronto, and realized that she could make a direct impact to many people really easily, and designed what she called a penny pack. And so she put together a lot of different basic necessities for people who are experiencing homelessness, and went around to a number of different organizations around the Greater Toronto area, and has distributed actually close to 1,000 penny packs now, and has a team of volunteers that helps her to pack them. She has sourced out various materials, and has a charity golf tournament and everything that's contributing. And so she's getting a lot of positive feedback about what she's doing, and she's continued to change and iterate her solutions to meet the needs of the people that she's providing these bags to, and thinking about all of the moving parts, and really bringing empathy as that focused skill that she's working on. So we implement a number of different kinds of student programming. Like I mentioned before, the program that McKenna went through is initially was an app design program, but she ultimately went through equity and inclusion and leadership as well, and has a number of different experiences with us that have further developed those skills. And so we do have programs that we deliver across the world. Young Innovators is one of those. And that's like a week-long program where students are able to dig deeply into a area of passion of theirs, and address a real issue that they want to get involved in, and really bring their voice to. Future Prize is something that we partner with associations to bring to a number of different schools, and it's an opportunity to have friendly competition, but also dig into really meaningful problems. We run future skills retreats inside of schools, and partner with schools to bring that to their students and customize those experiences. We also have day-long workshops that we can run in a variety of different contexts, be that in schools or other organizations that do work with students. And then we also support community-connected experiential learning in a variety of ways. So that kind of gives you a bit of an overall idea of what we do there. But what's really exciting is the community partnerships that we build to bring programming such as Young Innovators into different communities that may not otherwise have access to these communities. So here in Toronto, we work with the Leacock Foundation to do that, and they have sort of 3 different areas in the Greater Toronto area that they really are focused on bringing programming for middle school in particular, and we have partnered with them to deliver a number of different types of programming, but Young Innovators is certainly top of the list there. So that's a little bit about who we are as far as student programming at Future Design School goes. And I'll pass it back over to Les.
Awesome. And if you want to learn more about student programming, you can reach out to Rach through our email address up here. We can also share it with you later if anyone's interested in learning more about our student programs that we run in different communities. And then I thought I'd tell a couple of other little stories around how we work with teachers in schools to start with. I'll quickly tell you a story about a teacher that we worked with who turned her classroom essentially into a service learning project for her students. So we work with teachers to really help them to think about how are they connecting what they're doing in their classroom and academics to the real world, and how are they building those skills in their students through those real world experiences to develop character and to foster a sense of inclusion and stewardship of the planet and of each other. And then how are they able to actually use that as a way to assess student growth over time. And so that's sort of how we work with schools generally. And I have a story about a teacher named Jenna that we worked with. So Jenna was an art teacher in a rural community here in Ontario. And she was really interested in engaging her students in a problem that had community impact. And so the students started by brainstorming a number of different challenges. And they landed on this idea of using their art class as a way to learn more about local history. And in particular, they focused on Indigenous history and the history of sportsmen. It's a big community of fishing in the area. And so they wanted to sort of use that to revitalize a local park. So the students identified a challenge through a number of brainstorms. They conducted a lot of research and went out and actually talked to real people that are affected by the challenge. One of the things that we really encourage teachers in our programs to do is to get their students to actually go talk to real people out there in the world and really try to understand those problems. And then create real solutions and actually pitch them to stakeholders. So in this case, the solution that the students came up with was that there was a building in this park that had been vandalized continually, and so they worked with a local artist and they pitched this to the community council, and they got funding from the school district to actually go out and paint a mural that was based on the local and Indigenous history and connected to the theme of fishing in the area. And we were able to actually see this through and create this project out there in the real world. And so it's really important when we work with teachers like Jenna that we help her to figure out how do you find these real world opportunities and then connect them back to the learning in your classroom so that the students can see that they have the ability to make change in the world on their own, and they don't need to wait until they're a grown up to be able to have these leadership opportunities and to be able to make those changes. And then another story I thought I'd share was more around the strategy piece and how we help organizations to think about how are they serving their members and how are they serving the communities that they operate in. And so our team at Future Design School has a ton of experience in helping organizations to have meaningful impact. And so we take this human-centered approach to problem solving and we leverage it to help organizations think about what are the changes that they want to make in the world and how can they do that from a human-centered perspective. So we've helped schools and organizations with everything from things related to school, inside of schools, to working with big companies. We've actually worked with companies like Google and PayPal to help them solve strategic problems. And then we also work with community organizations to do that as well, to think about how are you actually serving the needs of the people in your area. And to do that, we leverage something called the design thinking process, which you may have heard of before and seen in different places. But what it really is a human-centered process for solving problems that involves defining a problem based on the needs of users, sketching out lots of potential ideas for how you can solve those problems, getting feedback on those ideas, and then creating prototypes that you can go and test. And so when we do this with organizations, we help stakeholders to unpack the problem based on real data from users. So helping to conduct user research and go out and actually find out what your schools and organizations need and what the community needs and what are the problems that are facing people. And then we walk people through a collaborative structured process to come up with lots of ideas and test those ideas really quickly by creating prototypes that they can go out and actually implement in the real world. And so if you're thinking about leveraging some design in the service projects that you're coordinating in your Rotary Club, we have a few tips for you that we thought might be useful. We only have a few minutes, but we thought we could share a few things anyway that you might be able to leverage. So the first thing is to start with empathy. So really try to understand the needs of people. And our biggest piece of advice to anyone doing any kind of service project is always to just go out and talk to the people affected by the challenge. Try to see the problem from their point of view and really honor their local expertise, because sometimes what we think is the problem is not really the problem. And it's so important to go out and just talk to the people that are affected by the challenge that you're trying to address. And I think that was something that McKenna really found when she went out and started talking to people who had more experience in working with the homelessness community in her area, that she really was able to understand that problem much differently. The second is to fall in love with the problem and not the solution. So remembering that your first idea isn't your best idea. So before committing to a service project, consider what other ways there might be to solve the problem. And then go through a facilitated collaborative ideation process to come up with idea, and use a process that really honors everyone's experience in the room. And if you can, try to bring the stakeholders in the community, the people that are affected by the challenge, into that ideation process as well, and being open to critique and feedback. And then, of course, be what we call prototype driven, which is really thinking about how can you test your ideas before you actually commit to something. And so we often, I think, in organizations and in schools, spend a lot of time planning big projects, and we want to get it all figured out before we share it with anyone else. And so the idea of being prototype driven is saying, get feedback from your users before you've actually made any final decisions. So if you've got an idea for a project, go and float it by a few people in the community first, and get some of that feedback. And I'm sure that those are all things that you're doing already. One of the things that I find about design is a lot of people are probably doing this and just not calling it design. And so these are just sort of some tips to be aware of as you're going through this process and thinking about being intentional about that. And then, of course, if you would like help with those things, FDS provides facilitation to help you to address big challenges like this in your community. And so leveraging outside facilitators can sometimes be helpful. And if you're interested in that, I'm actually going to put my colleague Sandra's email up here, because I am about to have a baby in like a week and a half. And so I'm going to disappear for a while. But if you're interested in learning more about that, you can reach out to Sandra. And that is all from us. It was a really fast way to share a little bit about the work that we do, but thank you so much for listening and for inviting us to come and share. Rach and I are both super passionate about the work that we do, and so are all of the people on our team. We all are here because we love what we do and we love empowering people to solve big problems. So thank you.
Great. Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Les and Rach, and congratulations. Obviously, can't tell that you're expecting with the web camera, but that's great news. Well, you must be very excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited and nervous, but it's my first. So.
Yeah. Thanks so much for presenting, and thanks for those tips at the end. So you're probably not aware, but many of our members will be, that our international service committee is currently, trying to review several different projects and trying to find some different options that we can get involved with. So I think that's definitely some great tips that I'm sure they'll take on board and use as part of that process to select the right project. So thanks for that.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, it was very fast, but if you want to keep asking questions about it, we'll have to dig into it more. So.
Yeah, thanks. So we might move into Q&A now with our members. Before we do so, I might just give our members a chance to introduce themselves as well. So everyone would have heard from Rushton earlier when he introduced you. But we've also got Sandy, if you want to say hi, Sandy.
Hi. Thank you for speaking with us.
No problem. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
And then we've got Shags. I know Shags is driving at the moment. Oh, he's giving us a wave. Thanks, Shag. And we've got Faheen as well.
Hi, thank you.
So I might move into Q&A, and I think Rushton, you had a question, so I might just hand over to you.
Great. Good to have you both here. And Les, actually, by the time this is our program, and it's a part of what people are seeing throughout the week, you'll probably be about 6 weeks into the baby being around. So
That's weird to think about.
Very cool to hear from you both. I'm curious how, in taking these ideas, you're both coming out of an educational space and working with non-educational clients. How some of your work has allowed you to see things from new perspectives. What are some stories of of working with non-educational clients that have been particularly interesting to you?
Yeah, I can think of lots. I think for both of us, I feel like educators are often very idealistic. And so it's definitely been a learning curve. I worked in nonprofits for a number of years before I went into education. I worked in human rights advocacy and then in design. And I'd never worked in a for-profit company before. And one of the things that I found really interesting was going from a nonprofit space to an education space. And then now sometimes like we'll work with like banks and stuff and like corporate organizations to help them solve big strategic problems. And I found that one of the things that was really interesting was just seeing different approaches to innovation and to problem solving within big companies, and how like we work with some really innovative companies like Google and PayPal and these tech companies that are doing really cool things, and seeing the way that they structure their workplace is really interesting. Like the Google employees have a lot of autonomy and of shared responsibility, which I thought was really great. And then comparing that to some other companies that we worked with who maybe have more hierarchical structures. Like to me, learning the politics of sort of how non-education clients work has been really fascinating. And I also think that another thing that's been really, I think, different for us is being in part of the company itself, part of Future Design School as a startup. Mm-hmm. Like Rach and I both joined Future Design School when we were 5 people in like a borrowed boardroom in a basement 4 years ago. And now we have like offices in Colorado and in Utah and in Chicago and in Toronto. And we've got people all over the world doing all these amazing things. But once upon a time, it was just us in a borrowed boardroom in a basement. And so seeing that growth has been really cool and really, really exciting thing to be a part of, to be part of building a company has been really great.
Can I ask, how did, that's a very quick scale up, obviously, from 5 people, I think if you said for over 5 years to having all those offices. Yeah. How did that journey happen, and what are some of the key learnings and takeaways from that?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I think that we talk a lot about understanding the needs of your users. That's like one of our sort of core philosophies that I mentioned. And I think for us, we really did hit on a need and on a problem, specifically in education, that schools and teachers recognize that the current education system is not like structurally set up to prepare students to go into the future jobs. And so there seems like there's a real need for that, and a lot of people don't know how to get there. And so I think that that's largely contributed to our success, is that we actually are responding to the needs of our users, and we've iterated a lot. Like we've changed a lot of things over the year and really being responsive to our users' needs. Because at the beginning, I think for the first 2 or 3 years, almost all of our growth was entirely word of mouth. Like we didn't have a team that was reaching out to new clients. It was all inbound requests, because people would come to us and I think the teachers and the students would have amazing experiences, and then they would tell other people. And we found that that's been in the education space. It's the word of mouth has been huge, and people recognizing that we can help them to actually solve meaningful problems that they have.
I think too, like our team is largely educators. And so, we're learning, we do of course have like a great team of experienced entrepreneurs and engineers and designers and everything as well. But a lot of our team are educators that are moving into this work. And so we deeply, deeply understand, and that empathy is just huge, a great asset.
Yeah. And we all care a lot.
Yeah.
We love our work.
We love our work
a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, that's the great thing about, teachers, and my wife and I were discussing that the other day about teachers and the connection you form with them. And I think a lot of it is around that empathy that you mentioned, and how much they care in the relationships you form with them. That's great. I think Sandy has a question.
Yes. I was just wondering, what age group are you working with in the schools? Like what's your youngest, and what's your oldest group?
That's a great question. We work with everyone. We, in terms of our student programming, we do a lot in middle school and high school sectors, just that seems to be where the initial uptake has really grown. But we do work in higher ed as well, and into the younger grades as young as kindergarten. So, we're quite flexible that way, and being educators and having so many educators on the team, that we're able to design those programs with sort of expert team members in mind to help guide us. So it's been really, really exciting.
That's amazing. I mean, you really go from like kindergarten to Google. That's
we joke that we work K through CEO. Yeah, we say we work K through CEO, and actually sometimes it's interesting. There's some programming that we do in some of like in our facilitated ideation sessions where we'll do the same activity with like fifth graders that we'll do with CEOs, and the fifth graders are often better at it.
Yeah.
Because they're more free, like they don't have some of those, they still have that creative confidence to share their ideas. And yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
And Rushton, I think you had another question as well.
So for Rachel, you come from the Kanien'kehá:ka community, and I'm wondering, like, in coming to this setting where you're doing lots of consulting, what elements of that background have been important for the work you do?
I think, first of all, this position has probably been the most empowering role I've held. I obviously loved being an educator, but I feel this allows me that freedom to explore some of those skills and that knowledge and cultural pieces more deeply and in a way that is more personable and allows me to share in a different way. And so in terms of the work that we're doing here, a lot of what I'm doing is that relationship and understanding self and building identity into really everything that we do, and making sure that there's time and space for that in the education sphere. Being a part of empowering kids to also be comfortable and take sometimes the uncomfortable steps to dig into that at first, and knowing that we need to create safe spaces in schools for everyone to have those conversations and to feel comfortable with discomfort.
And Rach has built a ton of our programming and our student programming and our adult programming around equity and inclusion. And so we've been working increasingly with other organizations outside of the education sphere as well to help them think about what does equity and inclusion look like in your organization. And Rach has been really spearheading all of that. So.
Oh, thanks. So we might wrap up the Q&A there. So Les and Rach, thanks again for taking the time out to present to us today. Before we go, I'd just like to encourage all who have enjoyed this program to let us know what they think. Below on our webpage, they'll find the discuss tool for sharing and responding to comments. So please take a moment to add to that conversation. And members and Rotarian guests, make sure you fill out the attendance survey too. It helps us know about the reach of our efforts and also serves as a make-up for a missed meeting. If you put your email address properly below, you'll get a message you can pass along to your club secretary. So as always, we'd like to give the final word to our speakers. So Les and Rach, over to you.
I would say, first of all, thank you for all the great work that you do. I've known of Rotary for a very long time, since I was in school. I remember doing work with Rotary clubs in my own community in rural Ontario. So thanks for that. And as you do that work, I think that number one rule of empathy is at the heart of everything. So keep your users in mind and try to really know them and understand them, which I'm sure you all do a wonderful job at. So thank you for that work that you're all doing.
Great. Thanks so much. And to our members and guests, thanks for joining us, and see you next week.